finally marked the song while talking. This morning we're going to be looking at the book of Esther. We'll start with reading the whole thing. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, it's about 7 chapters. It's not a horrible read, but we're not going to read the whole thing. And so, if you're unfamiliar with the story of Esther, um, it is a pretty neat story, and we'll dive in a little bit in order to make sure that we understand uh, the basics while we go through. But there's a couple of really interesting things as we go through the book of Esther that we can draw on for our daily lives today. Sometimes you find yourself in a situation and you're thinking, how did I end up here? How did I end up right here, right now, at this time? And is this a time where I should be speaking up for God? Where I should be reaching out to this person? I'm the only one that goes to my church that I know is faithful, that knows this person. I guess it's on me to try and talk to them about the gospel, right? The the idea that we have in life as we go through oftentimes is somebody will take care of that, right? Especially when you grow up in a house with a loving mother who takes care of you and makes sure that there's breakfast there for you and make sure that there's lunch packed in your lunchbox when you go to school and that there's dinner on the table when it's time to eat and that there's clean sheets and that there's just extra toilet paper in the bathroom. All these little things that moms or dads take care of us as we grow up. Somebody will take care of that for me. And then at some point we step out onto our own and realize, uh-oh, I have to do this myself. When you move into your first house on your own or your first apartment, how do I get dinner? Uh, you know, who who's responsible for this, right? These are things that happen as we grow up. But I think, a lot of times we have this ability to think somebody else is going to take care of this. And as we mature, we realize nobody else can do this for me with many things. I have to do this myself, especially in our salvation. I have to do this myself. Your parents can't wish you into heaven, they can't pray you into heaven. They can only show you how to get yourself there. So you're going to have to take some personal responsibility as we go through it. But let's take a look specifically at the book of Esther and this main verse that we look at, which sums up the book of Esther so well, is from chapter 4 and verse 14. For you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained your royalty for such a time as this. And that is one of the things that we have to recognize in life is whether or not God has put you right there, right here in this room for such a time as this. There are times when and we get into discussions oftentimes when I'm talking with people in the religious world, I will talk to them about miracles. And they will have a shocked look on their face when I say miracles don't happen today. They happened then. They don't happen today. And they say, but there's miracles. I can tell you about miracles. And they will tell me about wonderful and amazing things that happen in this world. And I have to step back and say, let's define what a miracle is. Because yes, if we look at life, birth, the raising of our children, the beautiful wonder in these children's eyes as they look at their moms and dads in this room and they give you a hug and pat you on the shoulder and it's the cutest thing you've ever seen. When we look at that, yes, there is a miracle to life and to this world and how God built this and put this here for us. But that is a miracle that we are experiencing the benefits of, but not witnessing happen. God set very specific rules in order for us to live by. And we call them physics, biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, if you really have to go to that much class, right? We call them all these things. Mathematics, rules, right? Astrophysics. There's all these rules that God put into place for us on how everything is going to work today, how everything in the world is going to work. And he says, this is how you will experience your life. Then, when God wanted to show his power at very specific times, he broke the rules just to prove that he could. Walking on water, right? A miracle. The other things that we see, when we see today in our lives, and if we're looking, we can see God working. So, God working in our lives today is not a miracle. It's the providence of God. And that was a long preamble to Esther. We're going to be looking at the providence of God working in her life because this is a really interesting book when you look at it just from a literary, why is this added? Why is this in the scriptures? It's an incredible story, but there's no mention of God. There's the Jewish people. But God is not an active force in here in this book. There's no miracles. There's no thunder from heaven. There's no prophets. There's no foretelling of the future and it coming to pass. It's a story of a woman living her life and finding herself in a very specific situation. It's all providence and her bravery to step forward and live for God. So as we look at this, there's a silent story that's kind of happening, and basically what happens, and I'll try and summarize this in the best way possible. I don't have a summary in the outline, and I should have, but it's one of those things that now I'm regretting. Okay, so we have Esther, and uh, she's living in a place, and there's the king is there. The king is he gets upset with one of with the queen and has her removed. Okay, and he has her removed, and Esther's uh, then has a chance to become a queen. Right, she becomes a queen. She gets chosen to replace the old queen. Now, Mordecai, a relative of Esther's, overhears an assassination plot. Okay, so he's also working in the background and he saves the king. There's a bad guy named Haman. Haman's plotting against Mordecai, doesn't like this Esther situation, doesn't like what's going on. Haman has it out for the Jews. The king has a sleepless night and he's just going through and reading the the briefing that's been prepared for him that goes in the books. This is what happened last week. This is what happened the week before, and it's people's jobs to write briefings for the president, the king, and we'll see if they read them. Yeah? Like, I gotta write this thing. It has to go in. This is now an official government record. So he's reading the government. He just can't sleep one night. He's reading government records. He reads about Mordecai, and he reads about Mordecai saving his life. And Esther also steps up and she takes a risk. And we'll talk about this a little bit, but she takes a risk and she tells the king, "Hey, these Jewish people that Haman's after, these are my people." And for her to step out and ask the a favor of the king, and we think of queens today as the right hand of the king, but she did not have that kind of clout in that time, in that relationship. She had to watch every step as she requested something of her king and as she let it be known finally that she was a Jew, that she was an Israelite. And so in so doing, and with her conversations with Mordecai, and this is Mordecai that said this in Esther chapter 4, he said, maybe you were put here just for this time. In so doing, she took up the courage to step out and ask for her people to be saved. Now, the king had already made a decree based off of evil Haman's uh, uh, recommendation that we get rid of all the Jews. So he'd already made a decree, but then he said, "You know what? I'm going to let the Jews defend themselves. So you can try and wipe them out, but I'm going to let them defend themselves." And they were successful in defending themselves because he didn't want to backtrack. It was a bad thing for the king to admit that he was wrong. So he said, "I wasn't wrong, but I've made another decree. I've made it a secondary decree." So he decreed that they could defend themselves, and the Jewish people were saved by this young woman meekly having courage and going to her king and saying, "Save my people. This is my family." If we look at Esther chapter 2, verse 17 here, you know, as Esther becomes the queen is the heading here, the people's heading that they put that the editor put in this Bible. Verse 17 says, "The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness with him more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his princes and his servants, and he made a holiday for the provinces and gave gifts according to the king's bounty." You know, he chose her. Now, it doesn't say, "And God made him choose her." And God set aside the laws. God decided, he sent an angel down to tell him, "You must choose Esther. You must choose her." He didn't do things, it wasn't a vision that the king had that said, Esther's going to be important in my life. God told me that Esther's going to be important. I'm going to listen to God. It wasn't miraculous, it just happened this way. We don't see it now, but there's a beauty in what you see at the end. While it's happening, you're just in your life. When you look back, you can see God calling all the plays. You might be out there playing on the field, you might be injured, you might be scoring the touchdowns. But when you look back and you see that God was calling the plays, you can see the beauty in the game plan for those of us that are football fans. Looking here over in, and if we go to Romans chapter 8 and verse 28, which I do have marked over here, I think. I don't, but I can get there. In Romans chapter 8, verse 28, it says, "We know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love God and to those who are called according to his purpose." And so God is going to be working for our good in our life, whether we know it or not, whether we look at it or not, whether we recognize it or not. And we can be looking for God and completely miss it. Because when we look at these mathematical things and the physics things that people say, there's the butterfly effect, the chaos theory, there's these all these things they say, well, this windstorm here, this tropical storm that wiped out Florida was because of a butterfly flapping its wings in China a year before, and that caused this, which caused that, which caused this, which caused that, which then turned into this. It's more likely sunspots or whatever, but it's okay. We understand these theories, they come about, but whatever these theories are, whatever made the sunspot pop right at that spot and make a hot spot on Earth, whatever made that butterfly flap its wings, whatever these things, God was in control of these things. God was the one who's using all of the physical world to bring about the things that he must have in place. But we're oblivious. Probably 99.999% of it. And we look back and we just think a song came on the radio and I looked down, but then I heard a bug hit the windshield and I looked back up and I saw a car stopped in front of me and I hit the brakes, and what made that bug hit my windshield right then? That was God. Right? For us, that was God. And we look, we see these little things and maybe it was and maybe it wasn't. Maybe that's just part of the world that we were living in, but we can't know until we see it all unfold. Esther here, getting back to her, she did not know that she'd be chosen as a queen in order to save her entire people. She just knew that she was living her life and she got put in this position. Back over in Esther chapter 4, so I try and keep that open here. In 13 to 16, in which we read 14, but in 13 to 16, just kind of looking at it all here, it says, Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not imagine that you're in the king's palace, that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at a time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and if you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have attained this royalty for such a time as this? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, Go, assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens also will fast in the same way, and thus I will go to the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. She broke the law, and that's what I'm saying. She didn't have the class, she didn't have the status to go and ask the king of these things. She said, I'm going to have to step outside the law. And if he doesn't smile at me when this happens, if he doesn't take me seriously, if he doesn't care for me in this moment, I will die. If I perish, I perish. What a powerful statement to say on behalf of your people and those that you love. What courage does she have at that point where she says, This is against the law, but it must be done? And I'm very much looking at the fact that I may die. Over in First Corinthians chapter 16, verse 3, so verse 13, sorry. It says, Be on the alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. These things, these verses that tell us to be strong and courageous, these verses that tell us to be strong in our faith and to stand up for what is right. And I think that when we, there's, I mean, men act in a lot of ways. But when we see somebody say, act like a man, they're telling them, stand up, be strong, stand up for what's right, protect those around you, act like men, be strong, be courageous, stand firm. God's reveal here, back in the book of Esther and over in chapter 7, in verse 9, it says, 9 and 10, it says, Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs who were before the king, said, Behold, indeed, the gallows standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the king. And the king said, Hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows which he had prepared for Mordecai, and the king's anger subsided. There's a there's this little this the reveal, right? The plot twist, right? What a great movie this makes. When we see Haman thinking that he's getting one over on the Jews, that he's vanquishing his nemesis Mordecai. I'm gonna hang a gallows. It's huge. What was it? 50 cubits high? 50 cubits high. Cubit, about a foot and a half, 16 inches, I think, is what a cubit measures to, if I remember correctly from the story of the ark. And so as we get this, we're looking at 70 feet, 70, 75 feet high to hang a man. It's going to be quite a show. Haman was trying to make a statement, was going to make quite a show. He prepared a lot, but he got what he deserved. And over in 8:15 to 17, then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal robes of blue and white, with a large crown of gold and a garment of linen, of fine linen and purple, And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. For the Jews there was light and gladness and joy and honor. In each and every province and in each and every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree arrived, there was a gladness and joy for the Jews, a feast and a holiday, and many among the peoples of the land became Jews, for the dread of the Jews had fallen on them. Interesting. We had honor given to the man who was to be hanged. They were marked for death, they were given victory, they were given deliverance. Over in the book of James, if I have that marked, I think I do. James chapter 4 and verse 6. But he gives a greater voice that but he gives a greater grace. Therefore it says, God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Again here, Mordecai and Esther, they were humble. They were serving God. Haman was a man who was trying to get ahead. God recognized it. So providence, not province, providence and courage today, when we look at Galatians chapter 6 and verse 9, it says, let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. If we stay strong, we're going to reap. We're going to get the things that God has planned for us. Now, does this mean that we're going to get rich? Does this mean that we're going to find a winning lottery ticket laying on the ground? Or does this mean that we're going to trip over something in our backyard and up from the ground comes oil, right? Or that happens to just be a giant gold stone in your backyard that you tripped over and, oh, I'll pull this out of the ground, take it to the bank, see what it's worth. This is not what God promises Christians. This is not what the early Christians lived through. This is not the way the apostles had their ends. They did not become rich men. They loved Jesus. They were with Jesus. They served him. They did not become rich men by today's standards or by the standards of that time. They were persecuted and martyred, but they stood strong. They ran the race. They are in their reward now. Our race is not to as to have the American dream, the boat, the plane, the car, the everything. Our race is to make sure that we get to heaven first. Those other things come, they may not. We might be in a little apartment. We might be living with mom and dad for the rest of our lives. Might be moving in with our kids if we have to, right? These are the things we may end up. Even occasionally, some people end up living in a van, right? You live in your car. You live in a tent. You can live in a tent and get to heaven. Lots of people in the Bible did it, right? Lots of people in the Bible did it. Where has God placed you? You know, there's and I can't answer this question. Um, I can't answer what it is that you're going through in your personal life. This is just for you to think about. Who has God put you in touch with? What little opportunities has God given you that seem little now that might become huge later? Right? What little thing are you good at that it turns out other people around you aren't? What talent do you have that you're possibly squandering? Perhaps you were made for such a time as this. My wife bought me a t-shirt that says that. I like to find opportunities to wear it just perhaps for such a time as this, right? This story of Esther, this incredible story of just a young woman who stood up for her people and saved them all, gives us courage today. We have influence, but we might have to make some sacrifices. We might have to step out there and put ourselves in a little bit of danger here and there. And are we going to act or retract? There's a time where you can say, that's not how Bible says that. That's or did you know the Bible says this? Did you know that Jesus loves you? That Jesus is real? There's a time when we can step out and say that, or you can go and pull that hand back. In your mind, you do that a lot. Maybe I should say something, maybe I shouldn't, right? And there's that we're all struggling with exactly when to say, how to say it just right, how to get it across. And I'm not saying you have to say everything that comes to your mind about Jesus to everyone all the time. I understand that your message can be lost if you overuse the amount of words that are in your brain that can fly out of your mouth. I understand that there's power in few words sometimes. So I'm not saying that every time it comes up you have to do it, but I am saying that when it really comes down to it, we have to be willing. When we know it's the right thing to do, we have to be willing because our friends, our family, the people that we love, the people that we might want to date, the people that we think we might want to marry one day, their souls are in jeopardy. And if we don't say something in the right time, heaven's just not quite as good if it's not full, right? It's going to be great for us, but you know, and we sing songs about no tears in heaven, but really what it says is God will wipe away all tears. And that's an interesting thing. You wonder if there is not a little bit of sadness that we see when it's, oh, cousin Jenny not making it. I loved her. I wonder what happened. How did we fall apart? Right? These things. My best friend Jimmy. He's not coming in. I don't know why I got J names on the top of my mind. Jenny and Jimmy not going to make it to heaven. Right? What could I have done? What should I have done? God will wipe away our tears, but we're going to know that we failed them in some way potentially. So there's God's hand that we see here in the book of Esther. There's Esther's heart. But there's your mission, is what we're talking about today. The providence of God being invisible but active in our lives. Again, we have times where we can look back and say, I think that was him. Pretty sure that was him. Maybe we don't get a book of the Bible written about us so that we know it was him. But there are times where we can look back. Your job's to get to heaven so that you can ask, was that you? Was that specific or was that just kind of happenstance? There's probably a lot of things to ask that about. Your purpose in life is to work for God. We try to find purpose in a lot of things. If your purpose is to the save the the unicorns, right? You can save the unicorns. Unicorns actually translated better rhinoceros, right? But if your job is to save the rhinoceros, you can go and you can spend your whole life. And when a rhinoceros dies, the chubby unicorns, when you fail in saving one of those rhinoceros, your entire life can fall apart. Whatever it is that's of earthly value to you, if you make that your purpose in life, it will fail. But if your purpose is getting to heaven and dragging other people with you, then your work is not in vain. I know that every bit of work that I produce when I go to my government job and sit in my cubicle and tippy tap type on a computer is all going to be gone in 5 years at best, 7 years maybe, because the government's slow about things. So I know that everything that I produce has a shelf life of 5 to 7 years in my work life. But if I can make one Christian, and they make a Christian, and they make a Christian, I've built a legacy. I had a buddy the other day tell me about a risk that he took. He was telling me a story about a risk that he was out there, and he said, I knew probably shouldn't have done it. Probably wasn't safe. My wife wouldn't be happy with the fact that I went ahead and you can insert skydiving or whatever. Just pick your activity. But he said, God's got me. I'm good. Well, he does. There is a confidence that you get if you know you're going to heaven. God's got me, and Jesus take the wheel should not be taken literally, right? Jesus take the wheel could end up with you in a ditch, right? So don't let go of the steering wheel of your car, but understand that you're letting Jesus drive your life, and that's the spiritual message. But the courage, there is a courage that we get when we say, God's got me, I'll be okay. I don't, if these people don't want to be my friend because I'm a Christian, I need better friends anyway. God's got me. I'll find them. I'll find them at church, right? I'll find them at church, or I'll find them online, or I'll find them at another church. I'll find them when I go to college. And if I don't, I'll find them in heaven. It'll be okay. Action. We have an action that we need to take. The time to follow Christ is now. If we are uh, inactive, if you're inactive in your journey towards Christ, if we think about the scriptures in the Bible that talk about finishing the race, running the course, when you bend down to tie your shoe during a race and seven people pass you that you just worked so hard to run faster than they did, it's gut wrenching to see you slip behind in that way. We shouldn't be taking time in our lives to our spiritual lives to bend down and tie our shoe, right? Now, if we have to take care of ourselves in order to keep moving forward, that's one thing. But when we do it, when you sit down to tie your shoe, you don't take it off and unlace it and relace it and take your socks off and change your socks, not in the middle of the race. Tie your shoe quickly and get back to the work that's ahead of you. We have a race to do. The action is now, the time is now. What we need for you is if you've been tying your shoe a little too long and you need some prayers about how to get back in the race, if you have not started the race, if you have not signed up for the race, if you need to jump into the event that ends in heaven, the time is now. If you have any questions, any thoughts, the need for prayers, if you'd like to get baptized, that's really what I've been talking about, jumping into the race. If you need to get baptized, the pool has not been closed. The pool where Antonio and I went in and pulled the cover back, it's actually still clean and open. Now it's cold, but it's clean and open, and we can make it happen today. I will find a place to get you underwater if you need to start your journey with the Lord today. If you have anything or any needs, please come and talk to me.